There's a lot of talk about opening our schools quickly, getting people back to work, and allowing public events to happen once again. We have been in this pandemic for over a year, and we want these things to happen quickly. And sure, we are vaccinating a lot of people quite fast, but there is still a lot of virus in our community. And then there's a risk of new variants. So the risk of transmission and continued infections still there. So how are we going to do it safely is a key question. Hello everyone, I'm Naveen Agarwal and I want to welcome all of you to my weekly video update. Now when it comes to opening everything up quickly and safely, we have always talked about testing, but we have struggled to implement a good robust approach because we have been challenged with this problem of accuracy versus speed. Now there's a new idea emerging and FDA is taking some action to promote that idea. This idea involves screening asymptomatic individuals rapidly with what they call serial testing, meaning one after the other. So I want to talk about that in this video. Go a little bit deeper to explain how it actually works. How does the math work? And finally, I want to review with you some of the still remaining risks, what we call residual risks, and some tips that I can share with you. So let's look into this. Let's first talk about testing programs. It's different from testing programs. The first is diagnostic testing. This is pretty straightforward. This is testing done on an individual person to confirm if they have an infection or not. But we have reason to believe they might have an infection. So either they are showing symptoms or they have come in contact with an infected person. The problem is most diagnostic tests are limited to symptomatic individuals and they require a prescription. So for asymptomatic individuals, this has been a challenge. Now screening, on the other hand, is done in a way randomly on an individual, and the goal is to manage the risk of exposure to the entire group. We need a quick decision. That person may not be showing any symptoms at all, and we don't know their history of contact, so we have no reason to believe that they definitely came in contact with another person who might be confirmed infected. Problem is we have very few options for rapid testing with high accuracy. They are coming up now more and more, but we still have very few options. This temperature scanning is not that reliable. It's somewhat reliable, but not that reliable. Most rapid tests not suitable for asymptomatic individuals. And that is where this idea is interesting. So what's a serial testing approach? Serial testing approach is when you test an individual randomly once, and then you test again the same individual 1 or 2 days later. Why it may work? CDC is making recommendation that serial testing at least once per week, along with other mitigation measures such as masking and social distancing, can help reduce the disease transmission. So FDA has come out with this announcement and they are saying that they believe that evidence of a test's strong performance in symptomatic patients combined with serial testing can mitigate the risk of false results when testing asymptomatic individuals. So we're going to look into that. So they're taking a new approach. They want to allow the test developers to seek screening claim with serial testing if the clinical validation with symptomatic patients shows at least 80% positive agreement with 70% lower bound of the 95% confidence interval. Basically what they are saying is that they expect certain minimum performance with symptomatic individuals before they will allow an indication for screening with serial testing. They will also require serial testing be done over 2 to 3 days with at least 24 hours and no more than 36 hours interval. Now, going back to once a week guidance from CDC, FDA will consider that in certain scenarios. There will be a requirement to conduct post-authorization studies to establish performance in asymptomatic individuals. So they'll allow this claim to go forward with performance based on symptomatic individuals with the requirement of post-authorization study. The reason being that doing a clinical study on asymptomatic individuals takes a long time. And FDA wants to really accelerate authorization for screening. So they will put a minimum bar and they'll require post-authorization study. Makes sense. their EUA can be revoked if study not done or adequate performance not achieved. So they hold the right to pull it all back. Okay, so let's see how it's going to work. Suppose 5% of the population is infected. We just make an assumption, 5% disease prevalence. And we test 10,000 individuals with a perfect rapid antigen test. Okay, so we have two scenarios. Either some people are confirmed positive and others are confirmed negative, and the test gives us whether a positive result or a negative result. So if someone is confirmed positive and the test gives us positive result, that's a true positive. And in this case, we would expect 500 true positives, 0 false negatives, 9,500 true negatives, and 0 false positives. That'll be a perfect test, right? But our test is not perfect. So let's see if our test has sensitivity, which is also called positive agreement of 80%. Remember, that was the lower value that FDA expected. 80%, and specificity is negative agreement is 95%. This is very typical of rapid antigen tests. So again, we put the same contingency table. In this case, we will have some false negatives because our test is not 100% sensitive. So we'll have 400 true positives, 100 false negatives, 9025 true negatives because we have only 95% specificity, and 475 false positives. So the numbers at the bottom are the sum of all those numbers. So we basically have 875 people tested as positive. Remember, we expected only 500. So this test will give us more positives than there are in the population. So as a result, our level of confidence when someone measures positive with this test is not 100%. And that is called positive predictive value. In this particular case, you take 400 and you divide that by 875 to come out with the positive predictive value of 45.7%. So half of the time we're going to be wrong with this test if we do it only once. Similarly, the negative predictive value, meaning if the test is negative, how likely is it that the person is truly negative, will be you take 9,025 and divide that by 9125 in this case. And you get 98.9%. So negative predictive value is pretty decent. 99%, nearly 99% confidence that the person is truly negative. But positive confidence is very low. So now, if we did it again, let's see what happens if we did it again, only on those who tested positive. Remember, we had 400 true positives and 475 false positives for a total of 875 results. And again, we're going to do the same test, 80% sensitivity and 95% specificity. Let's do this. So true positive when tested again will be only 80% of those 400, only 320. So we'll have more false negatives. And true negatives when tested again will be 95% of 475, which is 451. So we can build our table again. And that table will look like this. You'll have 320 true positives out of the 400, 80 false negatives, 24 false positives, and 451 true negatives. We do our math again. We divide 320 by 344, get 93% positive predictive value. Now our level of confidence has gone up by testing again. And our negative predictive value is a little bit lower, 84.9%, among those who tested positive in the first test. Okay, now let's do this test again on those who tested negative. Same test. We had 9025 true negatives and 100 false negatives for a total of 9125. We will have true negatives when tested again, 95% of 9025, which is 8473. And true positives when tested again, 80% of 100, which is 80. Now let's build the contingency table again. Okay, so we'll have 80 true positive in this case, 20 false negatives, 451 false positives, and 8574. It's a rounding issue here based on the previous slide, 8574 true negatives. Let's do our math again. In this particular case, if you tested negative in test number 1 and positive in test number 2, that confidence level is only 15%. Okay, and we expect that to be low. But if you tested negative in the first test and negative again in the second test, now the confidence level is 99.8%. So we are nearly 100% sure that if you tested negative twice, you are negative. So let's put it all together. You can test positive in test 1, and then you can test positive in test 2. We had 344 cases like that out of 10,000. That gives us a positive predictive value of 93%. Very high compared to around 50% with just one test. Now, if you test positive in test 1 and negative in test 2, only about 85% chance that you are positive. So in that case, we may have to repeat the test a third time. 531. So about 5.3% rate at which we will have this issue. Now, in test 1, you can have a negative result. And in test 2, you could be positive. Again, this is a mismatch. In that case, we will have only 15% chance or likelihood that you are truly positive. So very low chance. And again, we might want to repeat it again. But if you are negative and negative again, that's close to 100% probability that you are truly negative. And that adds up to 1,000. So I wanted to go through this math for us to understand how it's actually working and why that minimum threshold of 80% is important. Now you can imagine if right out of the gate our test is less than even 70% has positive agreement on symptomatic patients, these numbers will still look pretty bad. So that's why there's a minimum bar at 80% with a lower confidence interval at no less than 70%. So I think they're requiring this minimum level of performance. But they are saying if you have it, yes, we will allow you to go forward with a screening claim, which should be done 1 or 2 days, 24 to 36 hours apart. And then you need to collect data on asymptomatic individuals, see how well your test is actually performing. But I wanted to go through the math with you so all of us could understand why doing it again will help us improve the level of confidence we will have, positive predictive value or negative predictive value. So I hope this is useful to you. Okay, now what are the risks? These tests are designed for certain variant of the virus. So that's one problem. As new variants come in, those variants may evade detection. So this may not work at all. Okay. Secondly, there might be a lot of problems in implementing it at scale, training people, having supplies. A lot of errors are made during collection of the sample and how the test is done. And as a result, we have received many reports of false results, not because the test is a problem, but the way it is done, because we are having to do it very quickly. So we'll have to be mindful of that. Bottom line is, if you have what we call discordant result, you tested positive first and you tested negative again, don't panic. Talk to your doctor. Maybe you have to do it all over again. But it is important to keep in mind that there are still limitations with all of these tests which are out there. And it is most important to talk to your doctor to make sure you are taking the right decision and you are understanding it correctly. Okay, that's number one. Number two is, if you're not vaccinated, try to get vaccinated as quickly as possible. Please do not hesitate. I have had the vaccination myself, no side effects, very comfortable, no problems at all. And I've made videos to share that, not just my personal experience, but also the data that has come out. Get vaccinated as quickly as possible. And if not, continue to follow social distancing guidelines, masking when you go out, keeping your distance. Remember, the sooner we break the chains of transmission, the sooner we reduce the likelihood of all these variants coming out in our community. And the sooner we can open our schools safely, get people back to their workplaces. All of us have been working from home or remotely, and those who cannot are being put to a lot of risk. And then we also want to go back to public events, right? Restaurants, rock concerts. We all want to do what we used to do before, so we can do that safely. I hope you will look at this, consider your options, and make the right decisions. Let me know if this makes sense, or if you have any other questions or concerns about this particular approach. What would you recommend that be done differently? I would love to hear your thoughts. Please drop a comment or engage with me on LinkedIn and have a conversation there. I look forward to hearing from all of you, and I hope all of you are staying safe in this very difficult time.